results you achieve will be in direct proportion to the effort you apply. There is a direct relationship between joy and effort. Dennis Waitley, a historically renowned motivational speaker and psychologist, was undoubtedly well-intentioned and likely helpful in the messages he promoted in these quotes, but now they're endlessly recycled by superficial quote websites and perfunctory gurus. While I cannot deny the spirit of these quotes, this video should clarify their shortcomings.
Contemporary society tirelessly promotes the concept that the results you achieve are in direct proportion to the effort you expend.
This concept has become a mantra for the world of sports. Specifically, it's pervasive in adolescent distance running. But are its proponents really justified?
Effort is a tool, and like any other, it works to an extent. A fact especially true in distance running. Our bodies adapt to become stronger or faster when they're challenged, and challenging ourselves sometimes requires tremendous amounts of effort.
But for those readily willing, often overzealous, to generate this challenge, they may find a brutal ceiling awaiting them. Overtraining can have devastating physiological effects, ones entirely contrary to the philosophy of challenge and training. There's a specific medical condition for this phenomenon, though it's not one that's easily diagnosed because its symptoms are so ambiguously caused. It's called overtraining syndrome, and recent studies in the fields of exercise science and sports medicine have revealed its role in injuries, burnout, performance plateaus, mental stress, and chronic fatigue.
Overtraining in distance running isn't as simple as too many miles, though. In fact, this video's focus on effort will revolve solely around the intensity of workouts. The effects of excess mileage have already been well documented and are well understood amongst high school runners.
Regarding intensity, studies have demonstrated that moderate levels of high-intensity exercise are superior to high levels of high-intensity exercise for performance gains and general well-being, and that overloads of intensive exercise similarly lead to overtraining syndrome.
So how does this connect to effort? As I briefly outlined, athletes who are extremely motivated for any number of reasons to challenge themselves to put forth effort are the ones who hit the ceiling of overtraining. Their effort expended ultimately harms them through performance plateaus and injuries, among the other symptoms outlined.
Let me paint a picture. Here's Jimmy. He's 15, decent at cross-country, and adores the sport as his whole world. But his diligence mirrors his adoration. He never exceeds his mileage, and is sure to stretch, to roll out, to condition, all is prescribed. He wants to improve, of course, and as efficiently as possible.
So, every workout he's given, he gives his all. He runs until his muscles seize, his breathing becomes violent, and his respite at the end is unfathomed bliss. To some of you, this sounds heroic, ideal.
Jimmy improves rapidly at first, but he quickly plateaus. He stagnates, and eventually gets injured.
He's done everything right, controlled his mileage, endured the tedium of stretching, rolling out, even proper strength training, and yet, nothing. So, how did we get here?
There's this one poster on some door of my school's fitness center that's always stuck with me. It looked almost identical to this one here, and it's strangely incredibly applicable to the nuances of sport, contrary to its many fraught PE class counterparts, just because of this one box at the end. Obsessed. It's the darkest red of them all, the worst, at least, according to general color convention.
If it isn't clear already, this video is only about those who lie in this box. Most of the high school athletes I've interacted with would not idolize Jimmy's efforts, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone runs for the sole reason to improve or with an obsessive fervor. We're in high school, not preparing for the Olympics.
My critique isn't of effort itself, which remains an important and essential part of anything in life, but of the psychological affliction endured by the few, where effort becomes synonymous with self-worth and identity.
Anyways, back to the poster.
In any sport, there's often a direct correlation assumed between effort and progress. This assumption is reinforced by its initial truth. Runners who are uncommitted or who are just beginning will see an increase in effort pay dividends, just like Jimmy did. However, most of these runners stop increasing their effort before they ever see it hurt them. So, the assumption pervades. It's only been proven true, after all. Why assume an upper limit if it's worked thus far?
So that's what you'd assume the PE poster would parrot. After all, American physical education systems have an abhorrent history of BMI report cards, inane and arbitrary activities, and inaccurate teachings of well-being. PE, despite its successes, is ultimately a superficial system fraught with inaccuracies.
This mindset is what caused me to overlook this obsession box. Why should I take advice from a program that so consistently fails anyone with more than a modicum of genuine health knowledge?
Thus, I ignored it. Ironically, though, my ignorance of that box led me straight to it. Dark red. I've had a tumultuous running experience in high school, mainly due to injuries caused by external health problems. But ever since I started, I've always had this zeal for running.
In freshman year, I wasn't sure why my coach wanted me to do rest runs, so I just ran everything hard. Eventually, though, I adopted the alternation between workouts and rest days that's common in so many high school programs. But I figured that when I was supposed to do a workout, to run hard, that's exactly what I was going to do.
Of course, this mentality is what coaches want to see in their athletes. Their main problem is worrying about high schoolers not trying hard enough due to laziness or otherwise. Thus, I'm not trying to argue that coaches are wrong to encourage this behavior. At a high school level, where the barrier to entry is almost non-existent, coaches are necessarily addressing the far more common undertraining, inconsistency, and low commitment in their athletes.
My brief periods of healthy running were generally characterized by me chasing a mythical ideal of exhaustion. Early morning hill rep workouts would always end in hyperventilation, and not due to some underlying respiratory issue like asthma.
I would get angry with myself for not being tired enough after workouts, and I'd get angry with others for the same reason.
I had this permanent shame about not pushing as hard as I felt that I should, but I also had some pride in my pursuit of this higher status, as if I had at least been enlightened above my peers.
My coach never encouraged me to push as far as I was. He even gave us brief lectures about the intended intensity of specific workouts, but was likely afraid of telling us off and discouraging anyone else from putting forth an honest effort. Regardless of anything he said or didn't say, though, I'd already so thoroughly internalized every message about pushing through muscular discomfort that I didn't need any encouragement.
My validation came from more senior team members urging me to push past pains in workouts, my friends and I recounting stories to one-up each other and how much we could brutalize our bodies, and seeing motivational content online that promoted resilience as an indiscriminate cure-all. My friend group in cross-country, composed of people who more or less thought like me, sort of fell into this trap collectively. In hindsight, I think we mistakenly took the physical endurance required when legitimately racing and applied it to every workout we did.
The joke of cross-country is that we're all masochists, but this joke couldn't have been more serious to me. I needed to be a masochist. I needed to relish the pain above all else in order to separate me from my peers.
I no longer just had a respect for working hard. It had gotten to the point where pain tolerance became a requirement for who I believed I needed to be. Part of this need, and part of my aforementioned shame, was probably that I could never quite pull off Jimmy's heroism during races, the one time when its emulation is absolutely necessary. For some unrelated reason, I was horrible at pushing through pain during races, and so I made up for it during workouts.
But I still can't, in good faith, say that there's much wrong with my base mindset. Physical strain and its pain are things that I think will be forever essential to my life. It's how I vent anger, prove that I can do hard things, and enjoy physical activity at all. I'm an obsessive person, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying pushing my body to the limit.
The problem arises when this mindset is idealized, encouraging unhealthy pursuit of some chimeric and masochistic practice.
To summarize, my problem was never my propensity towards pain or effort itself, but what it came to mean. Somewhere along the way, I adopted exhaustion as a prerequisite for self-worth and stopped considering whether that was healthy. And I know that I'm not the only distance runner to suffer for their overzealousness.
My experience is not a general representation of young athletes overexpending themselves. Plenty of us push too hard without tying it to shame or to self-worth. But the fact remains that high school running is a culture that normalizes and rewards overexertion.
My situation was a product of that culture, one that never made me aware of my own ignorance. So, what happened?
Well, as previously mentioned, overexertion was probably not the deciding factor in my injuries, but it played a role. Whenever I would try to get back into running, I would invariably push too hard and hinder my progress. And like Jimmy's example, whenever I managed to string together half a good season, I never really made it anywhere. Yet, this is where my story stops being the most useful lens to assess this problem through. There are too many other factors in my running journey to claim that overexertion alone or in large part induced my outcomes. Instead, I'll propose a new lens, a clearer example. You've probably heard of Larry Bird. He's inarguably one of the best basketball players of all time, and is widely credited with revitalizing the NBA in the 1980s through his rivalry with Magic Johnson. In a 2016 interview, Bird recounts that I had to run my 3 miles to warm up. I had to ride my bike 12.5 miles. I had to sprint. I always felt that I had to do more, more, more. Bird's story echoes the same themes of overexertion we've examined so far. To him, these activities were compulsory. He had to do them. He says that I couldn't not. That's just the way I was. Tragically, though, he recognized the faults in his philosophy as contributors to his career's end. He says that I knew I wasn't going to last long. I knew I was breaking down. But also that he can't play any other way. Maybe his career would have been better off had he toned his game down. Or maybe we would have lost the quality that made him so special. But the fact remains that his fervor pushed his body too hard and too consistently.
Bird's experience illustrates how dedicated athletes will push themselves to a breaking point if continually validated by our systems that fail to teach moderation. Anyways, I think now would be appropriate for a brief tangent. I've covered the main reason why athletes are encouraged to unmoderated exertion. Effort itself is rightfully valued in sport, but a ceiling is never made apparent. But I think this topic is also inextricable from a more sociological issue of masculinity.
This topic could really deserve its own video, but I don't think a deep dive would be within the scope of this video, especially as this is not a sociology essay.
Regardless, I still believe a study of effort is incomplete without at least a mention of masculine norms.
American culture is obsessed with the narrative that men should be emotionless, tough, able to push through anything. So our self-worth is often tied to our capacity to embody this stoic warrior. It's crucial to note that academic literature does not support that male athletes are any more physiologically susceptible to overexertion, or even that we have higher self-reported effort values. But the fact remains that, for men, the interpretation of this effort is different.
This does not mean that athletes not identifying as male are exempted from anything I've said thus far, just that I believe masculine norms are another mechanism for encouraging overexertion. Finally, wanting to be tough or resilient is never a bad thing, but the value we place on these qualities can be. They should not be used as universal indicators of self-worth or taken as far as I did.
Coaches in professional spaces are already well aware of these problems, especially in sports that have higher rates of specifically instantaneous injuries. Basketball and American football coaches moderate how much their players play, both to obviate the risk of instantaneous injuries like fractures or sprains, and to reduce their total load. Avoidance of overloading is especially prevalent in baseball, where the motion of pitching is uniquely taxing in pitchers' bodies, necessitating days of rest and the creation of systems like pitch count limits. At the highest level, where maximal effort can usually be assumed as a given, coaches no longer must worry about their athletes trying hard enough, and instead can focus on making smart decisions for their athletes' health.
I say this not to suggest that high school coaches should adopt the same methods as their professional league counterparts, but to provide another piece of evidence that avoiding overexertion is crucial for success. If constantly pushing as hard as possible led to new heights of athleticism, the voracious world of professional sport would evidence that.
At last, we've defined the clarion message that high school athletics sends. Effort is pain, pain is progress, progress is king.
For many athletes, including myself, this message curdles into a feverish delusion involving pain for the purpose of self-worth. So what? What is there to be done about this? I've already said that I don't think high school coaches should change their rhetoric, especially given that it works well for the vast majority of young athletes.
What I do think we need is a perspective shift around the high school paradigm. This narrative around effort cannot pervade if the athletes it affects are educated about how to preserve their health. The validation I received came from my teammates and online running videos, but if those sources instead encouraged healthy moderation, then I may not have turned out in nearly the same way.
My injuries, while once again largely unrelated to overexertion, nevertheless taught me how to apply my work ethic in ways that aren't physical pain.
When my path to running consists of doctor's visits, small workouts for specific muscle groups, rolling out, and dreadfully easy biking sessions, there's no amount of progress to be made with pain tolerance.
This is a frustrating realization for me, precisely because it's the opposite of what I had so ingrained in myself. But slowly, I learned to apply my effort into being diligent and consistent, and strictly moderating times where I'd be overeager to push myself in a workout. So, my definition of effort has been redefined. I've come to realize that maximal effort should be defined as including a moderation of unflagging fervor, rather than solely being a blind devotion to it.
Ultimately, I hope to prevent my circumstances occurring within other high school athletes through spreading this message. The more dedicated athletes who can incorporate this inclusive understanding of effort, the more productive and efficient athletes we'll have.
And to me, those are some of the qualities for why this sport is so special. So please, To those of you in that dark red obsession box with Jimmy, effort is complicated. But if you're truly committed, then the bravest effort will be changing how you understand it.